So, this story isn't your typical reincarnation story. Our protagonist for today was reincarnated as a sword. Yeah, you heard me right. He was literally a sword. This wasn't just some regular blade either. Our hero was a super old, magical sword who had watched the world change for centuries. It had seen a bunch of owners become legends, so you could say this sword had some insane stories. The best one? That was when the sword met its close buddy, Leon Burke. This dude was just a nobody, from some nowhere village. But once he got the sword, the two of them started wrecking monsters everywhere they went. They wandered all over, fought side by side, and did things nobody else could even dream about. But then came the big boss fight. One day, while they were climbing some snowy mountains with blizzards all around, our hero and his comrade found themselves in front of a massive black dragon. The comrade was exhausted but still looked ready to throw down. The dragon was not messing around either. It gathered a ton of energy in its mouth, looking like it was about to blow them away. Just as the dragon fired off a deadly attack, the sword lit up with a blue light that wrapped around Leon Burke. Instead of running, he just smiled like a madman, called the sword his friend, and told it to help him launch this final move. So, together, they rushed in, and the sword slammed a huge hit into the dragon. He jumped high, finished with a dramatic strike, and they actually took the dragon down for good. Absolute legends, bro! When they finally defeated the white dragon of the Frost Mountains, Leon Burke became king. As for our MC, the sword, it got the title Dragon Slayer. Pretty awesome, right? But before he died, he told the sword, which he called Gruhorn, to watch over his family. So, the sword went into a deep sleep, just chilling for a long time as it got passed down from one generation to the next. Then one day, our hero woke up because someone was shaking it like crazy and making a ton of noise. He was seriously pissed and wondered who the hell dared to be so rude. Turns out, it was some angry-looking young dude yelling that he was the new swordmaster. The guards started calling this guy Prince, and one knight tried to stop him, begging him to put the sword back, because only the king could touch it. But the prince just attacked the knight. Our sword was not impressed, thinking this boy looked and acted like a pig. This prince was yelling that there was nothing in the kingdom he couldn't touch, acting all high and mighty. The sword, now super annoyed, decided to check out this punk with its special appraisal skill. It found out the guy was Adrian Leonberg. So yeah, he was from Leonberg's family. But our poor sword was beyond disappointed. This kid Adrian was just a lazy, fat, talentless brat. Still, the prince tried to act like a big deal. He struggled to even lift the sword, but kept thinking that if he owned it, nobody could ignore him anymore. Our sword was just roasting him inside its mind, calling him a ridiculous fool. Then the kid held up the sword, called it the Great Dragon Slayer, and demanded its power. The sword was like, "Why would I ever help a loser like you?" Now, Adrian started waving the sword around like an idiot, yelling its name, while everyone else freaked out. The guards and maids begged him to stop. Drawing swords in the palace was a big no-no. But this guy ignored them and threatened anyone who tried to tell him what to do. He was sure that if he got the sword's power, everyone else would mean nothing. So, he tried to swing the sword as hard as he could. Then, out of nowhere, he just froze. The look on his face was pure confusion. Turns out, our genius prince had stabbed himself by accident while waving the sword around. Bro, that was next level dumb. The whole room went silent. One maid just gasped, and everyone stared in horror as the prince fell, bleeding everywhere. Guards freaked out, shouted his name, and called for the royal doctor. The sword was like, wait, did that idiot just stab himself? But then something weird happened. Gruhorn's own vision started to fade, and for the first time ever, our hero felt like it might pass out. Wild, right? So, who was Prince Adrian? Basically, he was the worst. He got nothing from his royal family except being arrogant. He was greedy, lazy, dumb, and everyone called him a pig. This was the guy who was supposed to inherit the throne, and people basically thought he was a disaster waiting to happen. But after he stabbed himself, which was honestly his own fault, and nearly died, things started to change. Then, people in the palace noticed he acted different. He stopped flipping tables, didn't call his weird friends anymore, and nobody saw him acting up. Some thought maybe he was embarrassed or scared, but most figured he'd go back to his old ways soon. But here's the crazy part. He wasn't even in there anymore. The sword's own mind had taken over his body after that accident. Our hero was in total shock, trying to figure out what had just happened, especially after causing the death of Leon Burke's descendant. While the sword, now in Adrian's body, was still trying to get it together, some servant ran in and said the king was coming, so the prince had to get ready. But inside, the sword was just annoyed, thinking the king only bothered to show up now. when he didn't even visit while Adrian was dying. One maid warned him to be careful what he said, since the nights were close by. It looked like things were about to get even more insane for our poor MC. So, the story picked back up with a super proper, white-haired guy walking in. This dude looked like he was born to be important, and right away, he started scolding our boy for acting all moody, even though he just survived almost dying. The white-haired man let the maid leave, saying the king basically expected nothing from the prince anyway. Ouch, that one stung. And our hero, which now stuck in Adrian's body, started wondering who this old man even was. The guy turned back and reminded the prince that they had a master-student thing going on, and asked if he was just going to pretend not to know him. That's when it clicked for our MC. This must be the pig's teacher. Nice. Another adult to deal with. Playing it cool. Well, trying. Our MC said his memory was kind of fuzzy, and he couldn't remember the teacher very well. The teacher looked seriously shocked, like he just saw a talking duck or something. But then there was a big announcement. The king was coming. Our MC figured, alright, this must be the father. When the king showed up, our hero was actually impressed. The guy looked like a real king, not some washed-up old dude. Turns out, the royal lion blood still meant something after all. Of course, the king just stared at his son with a cold look and pointed out that the prince didn't even bother to greet him. The king said it looked like almost dying, hadn't changed a thing about the boy. The teacher jumped in, probably desperate to save the day, and explained that the prince's memory was all messed up. Instantly, everyone started acting shocked, talking about how the doctor needed to check this out, and asked why nobody told the royal physician yet. So, the doctor got called over and checked out the prince, who was lying there in bed. The doc said he didn't see anything weird with the prince's body. He guessed the memory loss was just because of some trauma, and would probably go away. The king repeated the doctor's words, but he kept looking at his son with this cold stare, which totally made our MC sweat. Was the king onto him? Did he know this wasn't his real son? But nope, he just started mocking the whole memory loss thing, saying it was a super convenient excuse. Then he hit his son with a tough question, demanding if that meant all his old crimes were magically gone, like they never happened. Bro, this was rough. But he wasn't done. He explained, all angry, that people should make mistakes and learn from them. That's how you grow up. But if you forgot everything, like his son did, then there was no chance to learn at all. He said as long as things kept going like this, the prince would never move forward. The teacher tried to calm the king, but our MC could tell there was some deep hate in that room. Our hero realized he was in major trouble. Forget being treated like royalty, he'd be lucky if they treated him like a person at all. Then, he started getting angry, thinking about what in the world the old prince had done to make his dad hate him so much. But his thoughts got cut off when a woman's voice called him by a different name, Ian. Suddenly, the queen came in, hugged him hard, and tried to comfort him. She told him it was okay to be confused and that his memory would come back soon. She didn't care about the past at all. She just nearly choked him with her hug. Then she took his face in her hands and started worrying about how thin he'd gotten, which made our MC super confused. What thinness was she even talking about? But even with all that, the queen looked honestly happy to see him awake and safe. She warned him not to go near that dangerous thing again. Yeah, she meant the sword. Awkward. And said she'd been terrified he might never wake up. Our MC felt kinda guilty, knowing her son was actually already dead. But all this motherly love just felt super heavy. Finally, she said goodbye, promising to visit soon, and left as the night rolled in. Adrian sighed when she was gone, finally able to relax for 1 second. He started thinking about his fate. His old friend had asked him to look after his family, but here he was, having killed one of them by accident. Even though it wasn't really his fault, he still felt rotten about it. But the sword decided, if things had to be this way, he'd try to live a good life. Not just for himself, but for the dead prince too. He'd spent his whole sword life fixing people's messes. So, what was one more? Even if this new body was fat and weak, he could still work with it. He'd trained a lot of heroes before, right? So, our MC chose his first mission. Fix the mana heart. He started meditating and tried to gather mana, the magic energy stuff. A blue glow started to appear around him. But then, bam, something felt off. The energy wasn't getting absorbed at all. He kept trying, over and over, pushing as hard as he could. But all he got was an explosion of energy and a whole lot of pain. Then, he hit the ground, hurting and raging, and wondering what kind of broken body this was. He screamed inside his head, totally desperate and angry, wishing he could just have his original sword body back. Normally, he could have just forced the mana in, but not this time. Right then, a maid walked in, carrying some weird-looking drink from the queen. She said it might taste gross, but it was good for his health, and she hoped he'd be grateful instead of throwing the bowl like his old self would have. While the maid looked nervous, RMC just stared at the drink, totally focused. He realized it had mana in it, so, without hesitating for even a second, he gulped the whole thing down in one go. That's our boy. When he sees a chance, he takes it. The maid just stood there staring, totally shocked, while Adrian finished his weird magic drink and quietly told her to get out. She didn't waste a second. She ran off right away. The poor guy sighed and decided to try his luck again. He closed his eyes, trying to grab onto the mana from that drink. This time, yeah, it actually worked. The energy came when he called it. But there was a problem. He only got a tiny bit, and if he waited too long, it would just fade away like smoke. Not good enough. So, what did our hero do? He called the maid back in and straight up asked if she had any more of those drinks. This routine went on for a few days. Drink, meditate, grumble, repeat, until finally, he managed to save up enough mana to actually try the important stuff. He was so hyped, he could barely sit still. He realized he could finally create a mana heart, something he'd done a million times before, for everyone else. This should have been easy, right? But then, out of nowhere, a pain hit him so hard he nearly screamed. Poor guy finally understood all those cries his old students used to make. Turns out, making a mana heart hurts like hell when you're not just a sword. But he had to fight to stay awake, because if he passed out, all the mana would go wild and straight up wreck his body. So, our boy bit his tongue. Ignored the pain that felt like it might tear him apart, and focused hard. Bit by bit, he got the raging energy under control, carefully guiding it where it needed to go. At last, he felt the mana heart form inside him. He dropped to his knees, totally drained. But, bro, he did it. This time, it wasn't about making a mana heart for someone else. This was his own. For the first time ever, he couldn't help but yell that he finally did it. And then, bam! This orange status window popped up right in front of him, just like those game screens people always talked about. It said he'd created a mana heart, which was wild, because he remembered sending messages like that to his masters back when he was a sword. Next, a bunch of system messages started rolling in, saying the connection to the source was restored, but it was all glitchy and weak. Most of his old sword powers were useless now, except for a couple, and even those only worked a little. It turned out he could use something called the third eye and third ear, but it was limited use only. Not exactly the upgrade he was hoping for. Now, he tried out his new skills by looking out the window. Dude, his eyesight was insane. Way sharper than before. And, when he focused, he could totally hear the maid whispering outside his door, clear as day. That was awesome. Until his head suddenly felt like someone smashed it with a hammer. New messages popped up, saying he'd used all his mana and his powers got shut off. He grabbed his head, feeling super dizzy, and realized what limited use really meant. He was nowhere near as cool as he used to be as a sword. Now, he could only pull in a tiny bit of mana, just enough to snoop on people or see a bit better. Tough luck, buddy. But he didn't let it get him down. He told himself that once he got more mana, things would change. Right then, his stomach started rumbling like an angry beast. Our MC was starving. Priorities, dude. He called for the servants right away. For now, he decided, he just had to get used to this whole human body thing. A few days later, the queen dropped by again. She was beaming. All proud, because he'd apparently been drinking every single dose of her medicine. She said it meant he finally learned how to take care of himself. Along with her came a new guy, the queen's brother, which meant this was our MC's uncle now. The queen asked if her son remembered the man. And our hero, still faking it, told her he had no clue. She explained to her brother that the memory loss was real, so she wanted his help. Then, his uncle gave our MC a serious look and said that, at the end of the day, he was still his sister's kid. But he didn't sound happy about it, at all. He even teased the queen, saying she was acting like her son had lost some kind of awesome past, when, actually, his past kind of sucked. It was pretty clear this uncle wasn't a fan. Then he talked straight to our protagonist, making it super clear he was only going to help him lose some weight, nothing more. He told him to forget about any other help or crazy ideas, and the queen jumped in, acting really humble, saying she was thankful for even that much. The uncle told her not to forget that feeling, like he knew she might try to ask for more later. Suddenly, he kicked our MC so hard that he went flying to the ground. He stood over him and said, from now on, every bite, every drink, even every breath would be under his control. Prince or not, none of that mattered anymore. If our boy wanted real training or better treatment, he'd have to prove himself. The uncle did toss out a little hope, though. If the MC worked super hard, maybe he'd teach him one family secret move, but he was clearly just making fun. But our hero was furious. Like, who did this guy think he was talking to? Did he not know that the person inside this chubby body was the legendary sword who trained the greatest knight ever? The uncle just thought the prince was trembling from fear or embarrassment. But then, the MC stared him down, called him uncle, and threw down a bet. He said, half yelling that in 6 months, he would make his uncle acknowledge him, and if not, he'd do anything the uncle wanted. But if he won, the uncle had to grant him any wish he chose. That definitely got the uncle's attention. So, his uncle agreed, probably thinking this would be a fun way to mess with the fat prince. But our MC had fire in his eyes, and he was dead serious. It was time to turn things around and wipe that smug look off his uncle's face. Game on. Meanwhile, our boy, who the poor guy stuck in this chubby, useless body, was feeling the heat after making that crazy 6-month bet with his uncle. He grumbled about how heavy and annoying this body was, but he got right to work, focusing all the mana he had on burning fat as fast as possible. Bro, he was totally serious about getting stronger. Suddenly, his uncle spotted this blue mana aura swirling around him and pretty much freaked out. He demanded to know what he was doing and asked if he had seriously made a mana heart already. Our hero just grinned, acting all cocky, and let his uncle know he'd managed that trick a while ago. Then he poked fun, asking if the uncle was starting to regret their bet. But did the uncle look impressed? Nope. Instead, he snapped at our MC, asking where he'd picked up such a primitive technique and warning him he had no idea how big a mistake he'd just made. He explained that the mana heart thing was some ancient, low-class method only low-rate mercenaries used. Man, our MC nearly exploded inside. He simply could not believe what he was hearing. The sword guy turned prince started freaking out. All this time, he thought making a mana heart was top-tier stuff, but now his uncle was calling it trash? He asked what his uncle meant, totally confused. That's when the uncle decided to show off. He told our MC to pay close attention, then started doing his own thing. Adrian watched, stunned, as his uncle's mana twisted together into glowing rings. The uncle explained that this was the mana chains technique, and its whole job was to crush the aura from a mana heart. He said it was way easier and more stable, too. On top of that, he dropped a history lesson, saying even the famous Count Eli family fell apart a century ago because they clung to the mana heart technique. Nobody bothered with that old-school move anymore. Later, our MC sat with a thick book on mana chains, finally admitting to himself that times had changed. He learned that wizards now used magic circles to gather mana, but knights wove these chains instead. The number of chains was everything. 1 chain, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 5, which was super rare. As he read on, he realized this wasn't just some made-up junk. He got to a chapter about some guy named Altringen and froze. That name rang a bell. Back in his sword days, a nutty dude named Ernest Altringen had challenged him for the title of Sword Saint, using skills that were neither magic nor normal sword stuff. That made our MC grin a little, remembering those days, and he started to wonder what ever happened to that crazy guy. The next day, while he was out there sweating hard in training, his uncle marched over and asked if he'd finished the book. His uncle made sure to remind him how dumb his choice had been. But our MC just shot back with a cocky smile, saying he didn't regret anything, not even a little bit. The uncle looked ready to pull his hair out, thinking the kid was either too stubborn or just clueless. Then, Adrian tried to explain that not all mana hearts were the same, and asked if the uncle ever heard about difference in level. That just made him sigh and roll his eyes, saying that sometimes some idiot mercenary gets it in their head that they're a hero from the past, but every single one of those losers ends up stuck at 2 chains, never getting further. Then, his uncle threw down a challenge of his own, telling our MC that if he was really different, he should go beat a knight with 2 chains. If he could pull that off, he would actually become his guardian, like his mother wanted. That made Adrian laugh inside. Having this jerk for a guardian sounded more like a punishment. That last comment ticked off the uncle. Suddenly, this insane aura flared up all around him as he started listing off his titles: Count of the Kingdom, Commander of the Northern Army, Master of the Black Spears, and one of the 5 Silver Lions. Bro. Dude was flexing hard and angry. Even worse, he announced that he was a 4th rank knight, meaning he had woven 4 chains. He told our MC his full name, Vale Balorhard, and said he might even become his support one day. When he finished bragging, our boy asked if that was proof enough. Right then, a group of knights showed up and ordered the uncle to cool it and stay away from the prince. But he wasn't scared. He just smirked and told him not to back out of their deal later. His uncle shot back with the same kind of sneaky smile. So, you knew this rivalry was just getting started. After that, training totally wrecked our MC. He collapsed, barely able to breathe, while his uncle called it a day. He leaned against the table, feeling like he might actually die from all the pain and effort. In his head, he could practically hear his uncle's voice, laughing at him and trash-talking, saying stuff like he'd be lucky to even beat a knight with one chain. Never mind two. Dragging himself through the palace hallways, our MC cursed his uncle, calling him a total demon, and nearly tripped over his own sore feet. Then a voice called out, saying he'd been waiting for him. It was the royal doctor, who acted all thankful that the prince remembered him, even though he was just a lowly healer. He asked what he was doing there, and the doctor explained that the queen had ordered him to cast some healing magic on him. Then the moment he started getting his green healing energy ready, our MC freaked out, yelling for him to stop and shoving him out of the room before he could finish. He said he didn't need any of that. Not today. Dude was furious. If he got healed now, all the pain and sweat from his brutal training would have been for nothing. His knight just stood there, watching in silence, like he couldn't believe what he just saw. Honestly, our MC was a mess, but hey, at least he wasn't giving up. That's something, right? Anyway, now, it's time for our boy to eat. He was halfway through stuffing his face when he suddenly heard some dude call out, announcing he had arrived. The knight quietly told him it was the third prince, Jillian. Our MC, still new to all these royal faces, had to pretend he knew what that meant. Right then, Jillian walked in like he owned the place, looking all smug. He made some comment about hearing what happened to Adrian, and said he actually looked better than expected, which apparently disappointed him. What a nice brother, right? Our boy shot back with no warmth at all, asking what the hell Jillian wanted, and if he was just here to mess around, because he had nothing better to do. Well, that hit a nerve. The third prince gave him a look that could kill, and said he had heard a fun rumor, the whole bet with Count Balorhard, the 2-chain knight challenge, all that stuff. Then, just to spice things up, he leaned in and told him he wanted to be the opponent in that duel. When his brother left, our MC just sat there, confused and a bit annoyed, wondering who this cocky punk actually was. He started grumbling in his head about how sad Leonberg's descendants had become. The knight explained that Prince Gillian was famous for being a sword genius even as a kid. Our hero rolled his eyes at that, not impressed. But the knight added that he had already made 2 mana chains by the time he was 14, which made even our MC pause for a second. Okay, maybe the guy was a little bit special, but whatever. Before he could finish his train of thought, a maid came staggering in with a massive mountain of letters. She looked like she was about to collapse, and announced that all these were for the prince. That got his attention. He stared at the pile, wondering why. Suddenly, all these people cared about him. He opened up a few letters and realized every single one was a challenge to a duel. Apparently, half the kingdom wanted a shot at knocking him down a peg or two now that the bet was out in the open. But our hero just grinned. He saw right away this could actually work in his favor. He called the maid over and calmly told her to write down every single name that sent him a letter. Dude was already planning something sneaky, classic move. Later that day, he ended up back in the training yard with his demon uncle. His uncle tossed a wooden sword onto the ground and ordered him to pick it up, saying he needed to learn the basics before their bet would count for real. Apparently, the uncle didn't want to hear any whining later about losing due to not knowing the basics. Our MC bent down to grab the sword, grumbling inside about how his uncle could have just handed it over like a normal person. The second he picked it up, a bolt of pain shot through his body, and he let out a scream. Those muscles were still screaming from yesterday. Uncle Bill stopped him fast, looking surprised, and asked if he really hadn't gotten any healing magic. The MC shot back that, as a knight, his uncle should know why. Then our boy explained that healing magic just resets tired muscles, never letting them grow stronger. And the uncle actually approved of that, but just nodded in silence. But his uncle was done talking about healing. He told the prince to pay attention, because he was about to show a move, and he wasn't going to repeat it. Suddenly, the guy was surrounded by a wild, swirling mana aura as he got ready to demonstrate the kingdom's special training sword style, the move every knight started with. Then, he blasted through a set of lightning-fast moves, swinging the sword like it was a real blade and leaving deep marks all over the ground. Adrian just stood there, with his jaw on the floor, watching a so-called basic sword style that looked insane. Once it was over, he asked if that nutty dance was really just beginner stuff. His uncle said the training sword didn't even have a sharp edge, but it was perfect for learning. Then, just to be a jerk, he said that with the MC's total lack of talent, this was probably the best he could hope for. Instead of getting mad, our boy just started laughing loud, hiding his face. He remembered the old days, when his hero buddy Leon Burke used that same technique, the Dragon Slayer style, to literally kill a black dragon. Now it was just the baby course for royal knights. Times really do change, huh? He wondered out loud how such a legendary technique could end up as the basic warm-up for kids. The uncle just shrugged and said these basics were not going to win the bet, so maybe he should ask the queen for a better teacher. But our MC said absolutely not. He declared that he was going to win with this style alone. No other sword moves for him. His uncle just rolled his eyes but let it go. Then, our boy gripped the sword so hard, his knuckles turned white. While he tried to swing it around, he thought about why the Dragon Slayer style had fallen so far. He had to admit, it kinda made sense. Without the real dragon slaying will, and now that everyone had forgotten how to breathe life into their sword, it was only natural for the technique to turn into some cheap knockoff. He tried to pull off one of the moves, but failed so hard it was almost funny. Uncle Bill was right there to scold him, saying not to use just his arms, but his stomach too. Then, to make things worse, he added that the legs were important too. Of course, when our MC tried that, he collapsed on the spot, totally wiped out. The uncle barked that you had to use your whole body if you wanted to do a real sword move. Now, our poor protagonist had to admit, the uncle was right. Even though his body was still weak, and couldn't even fake the Dragon Slayer style properly, he swore he'd prove it wasn't just some old-school garbage. And so, the days went by, 1, 2, a whole week, while our MC trained like a maniac, never giving up for a second. Bro, this was only the beginning. So, after a whole month of non-stop training and deep meditation, some serious changes started showing up for our hero. One morning, a system window suddenly popped up right in front of his eyes. It told him his condition had changed. He was no longer stuck at morbid obesity. Now he was just regular obesity. Still fat, but dude, that was progress. And you could see his body was burning way more energy than before. Even better, all that awkward, clumsy movement was gone. He finally felt his body working together smoothly. So, every exercise he did actually started to pay off. Not only that, but all that grinding with mana finally paid off too. The annoying trait called mana sensitivity disorder finally vanished, replaced by normal mana sensitivity. Now, every day, he swung his sword more, like a real knight. Week by week, his strength just got better, and his eyes were basically on fire with focus. While he was deep in the zone, training like a maniac, he didn't even notice someone yelling for him to stop. It took his uncle's furious shout to snap him back. When he finally snapped out of it, he was standing in the training yard at night, pouring rain, his hands bleeding all over his broken wooden sword, and his uncle glaring at him like he was insane. In the background, a wooden pole he'd been beating on was still smoking from a lightning strike. No joke. Sparks were flying and everything. Seeing that, his uncle looked like he was about to explode. He grabbed our boy with a death grip and called him an idiot, yelling about how stupid it was to train in the rain. He warned that if the prince had been holding a real sword, he'd be fried by lightning right now, and all that would be left was a crispy royal. Bro, our MC just stared at his bloody hand in shock, while another system message popped up, telling him he had just snapped out of some ultra-focused state, and that his body wasn't going to forget that wild feeling. He had even unlocked a new trait, supernatural focus. Sweet, but honestly, that almost got him killed. The prince laughed weakly, thinking if he ever got that focused again, he might actually die for real, thanks to some random lightning bolt. Then, his knight ran up, worried out of his mind, while the uncle half supported, half scolded him. Uncle Bill just shook his head and called him the most stubborn kid he'd ever seen. And bro, he was right. Next thing he knew, our protagonist woke up in his bed, holding his head and feeling like he'd been run over. He wondered if he'd really blacked out this time. For a second, he remembered his old life, back when he was a legendary sword, always helping heroes win battles, leading armies, and teaching people how to be legends. He was always right there, but never the main player. Now, as Adrian, he finally got to feel what it was like to work for something himself. Every drop of sweat, every bruise, was his own, not just some memory in a blade. But damn, he had to admit, this body had limits, and if he kept pushing so hard, he'd break down before he even got to his first real fight. So, our MC decided he needed to find some kind of balance. He couldn't just rely on his old sword spirit anymore. He actually had to take care of this weak human body. After a month of grinding with the mana heart, he finally felt ready to level up. The system window came back, dropping good news. He had pushed his mana up to a new level, and his body could now handle even more. As his mana heart got bigger, his stamina went up too. Then, after another round of tough training, his body changed again, and a wild, fierce look appeared on his face. Now, feeling like a total boss, the prince finished his latest body-pumping session and announced to himself that he was finally done. He looked over at the sword resting nearby, ready to give it a try. The second he grabbed it, another system window showed up, telling him he'd hit the sword apprentice level. When he swung it, a blue aura shimmered around the blade. Hell yeah! He finally unlocked the basic aura. He stared at his reflection in the glowing steel, thinking that with this power, maybe he'd finally reached the level he needed. Later on, out in the training yard, Uncle Bill showed up looking annoyed. He told him that rumors about their bet were spreading everywhere, and now it was a major pain for him. Apparently, everybody in the whole kingdom was talking about their challenge. He said it might be smart to hurry up and pick a training partner before things got even more out of control. Our MC just grinned and said he already knew who his opponent was going to be. His little brother, Gillian. But he also explained to his uncle that he wasn't crazy enough to fight a two-chain knight as his first test. No way. He wanted to duel the one-chain guys first, warm up a bit, and the uncle agreed that was actually a solid plan. After that, he called for his personal knight, Cars, and asked if he'd finished the job. Cars confirmed he had already written down all the names from the duel letters, but he looked nervous as hell and asked if the prince was really planning to fight all of those people. The MC shot him a look and wanted to know if that was a problem. He said that most of these dudes probably hated the prince's guts and would try to hurt him if they got the chance, even if it was just supposed to be a friendly match. The MC just smiled, cool as ever, and said that was exactly why he wanted his uncle, as the referee, to make sure nobody died by accident. He asked his uncle if he could at least handle that much. Man, our MC was feeling confident now. Maybe too confident. But hey, after all that pain and sweat, he'd earned it. A few days later, it was finally time for our boy's first duel. The challenger was this guy, Taylor Tailheim, a young dude with a chip on his shoulder the size of a whole wagon. As he walked up to the first prince's palace, he couldn't stop thinking about how much he hated this place. All he could see in his mind was the face of that scum prince who lived here. Well, that guy was still burning with anger from something that happened years ago. At a royal banquet, the old Prince Adrian had called Taylor's family peasants right in front of everyone. That insult had made his family a joke with the other nobles ever since, and he wanted revenge more than anything. When he arrived for the duel, he did all the right noble things. He bowed and greeted the prince, but inside, he was promising himself that today, he'd finally get payback. He introduced himself as a trainee knight with one chain, saying he used his family's special sword style. But our MC? Yeah, he just looked at him like he was nothing special and wondered why Taylor was being so formal when this was just a training match. Then, like a real jerk, the prince said Taylor seemed way too weak to be a knight. Bro, that hit him right in the pride, making his anger boil even more. He decided right then that all the rumors about the prince being a total jerk were true. Before Taylor could snap and start yelling, a strong voice cut through the tension. It was Count Ballerhard. Yep, our MC's scary uncle. He told Taylor that he understood his feelings, but he needed to chill out because the duel hadn't started yet. Suddenly, it hit him. He was standing in front of the legendary Count Ballerhard himself. Dude almost fell over, trying to show respect, bowing deeply and saying it was the honor of his life to meet the Count. The Count just nodded and acted like it was no big deal. Our MC couldn't help himself and joked that it looked like his uncle was the real prince here. The uncle didn't let that slide and said if he'd behaved better in the past, things might be different. Our boy groaned, asking his uncle to please stop bringing up old stuff every single time. The Count ignored him, looking bored as ever, and told both guys to take their positions, then officially announced the match was starting. It was go time. The two fighters stared each other down. Taylor fired up his blue aura, then dashed forward, warning the prince to be careful, and jumped into the air for a dramatic attack. Our MC just stood there, cool as ice, waiting to block, and honestly, looked like he was bored. As Taylor came crashing down, he noticed that this guy was using way too many unnecessary moves. With a lazy little smile, our hero blocked the attack like it was nothing. Taylor's whole face twisted in shock. He couldn't believe the prince's mana heart could stop his mana chain attack. Supposedly, that was impossible, but the prince just shrugged and told him maybe it was because Taylor only had a single ring in his mana chain. He even joked that the hit felt like a tiny sting, which made his jaw almost hit the floor. Meanwhile, in the crowd, Some knights noticed a weird sound coming from the swords. Cars, our MC's personal knight, looked confused. But Uncle Bill knew exactly what was up. He stared at the fight with a deadly serious face, realizing he was witnessing the rare swords cry, something almost no one ever saw. Taylor lost it, shouting that this was impossible, then charged again, swinging like a madman. The opponent's swords smashed together in a crazy flurry, and this time, our boy had to work for it. He screamed and kept attacking faster and faster, actually forcing our hero to back up and defend. Then, the swords clashed hard, and a burst of light exploded, sending them flying apart. He stood there, breathless and shaken. That's when the prince figured out why everyone said mana chains and mana hearts were complete opposites. He could feel the mana inside his chest, almost going in reverse. That sounded painful, bro. But even with his body freaking out, he didn't lose his swag. He looked at Taylor, remembered who he was, and told him, with a cocky grin, that he should try calming down a little. Now, our MC got serious. He pulled all his senses deep inside, imagining himself sinking into a dark, silent ocean. There, in his mind, he reached out to the sleeping power within him, ready to wake it up. He called out to the part of his soul shaped like a massive dragon, not caring if it was called demonic or holy. When he touched it, the system flooded him with messages. His mana heart had accepted a giant will, and now it glowed a special color just for him. In his head, something called the Dragon's Eye opened, and the system confirmed. He had just awakened the true will of the Dragon Slayer. Then, a wild red aura burst around Adrian, pulsing with the memory of the sword that once killed dragons. His eyes shined bright red, and the power just kept growing. The system told him the Dragon Slayer heart was now active, and his energy merged perfectly with the sword's only purpose to kill dragons. Taylor's face turned white as he stared at the prince, frozen in fear. In his head, he was freaking out, asking himself what kind of monster the prince had become. At that moment, Count Balerhard's voice exploded across the field. He shouted for both of them to stop, his voice full of panic. But our MC, with his dragon eyes blazing and his red aura swirling, was ready to strike. His uncle yelled again, even louder, trying to stop whatever insanity was about to happen. But the prince didn't even slow down. The uncle realized in his heart just how dangerous this sword really was. He remembered the prince's only request before the fight ever started. If it looked like he was about to kill someone, then his uncle had to step in and stop him. Well, looks like that time was now. Our boy was about to go all out, and who knew if anyone could really stop him? So, Count Balerhard didn't mess around this time. When it looked like our boy was about to go full dragon and maybe kill someone, the Count just let loose with his insane blue aura and smashed in at the last second. Their powers crashed into each other like a thunderstorm. But, let's be real, our MC, even with all that dragon energy, was still a total rookie compared to his uncle. The Count's attack just blasted him clear across the training yard, straight into a wall. Ouch, bro, that had to hurt. When the dust finally settled, he was standing tall like the boss he was. And our hero? Well, he was lying in a pile of broken wall pieces, probably seeing stars. That's when the royal guards rushed in, all freaking out. One of them started yelling, asking what the hell the Count thought he was doing, and reminding him that beating up a royal was basically asking to get executed. But before things could get messy, our hero, still on the ground, by the way, stopped them. He managed to say, with a busted voice, that he actually asked his uncle to step in like that. Now, his personal night cars just stared at him like, "Bro, is this dude for real?" But the prince added, while spitting out a little blood, that he definitely didn't ask his uncle to smash him into the ground that hard. Then he just passed out. Classic. When he woke up, he was deep inside his own head, checking out his mana heart. And yeah, he was freaked out. His mana heart was almost totally shattered after that hit. He realized his uncle was on a different level, way above any of those newbie one-chain knights. Still, he was glad there was no real damage. He actually started grinning to himself, thinking things worked out okay, and that he still technically won the duel. But then, out of nowhere, his uncle's voice cut through the room, asking why in the world he was smiling. Our boy was surprised to see the Count there already, but the Count didn't waste any time. He wanted to know what the MC was thinking, and he started chewing him out for using that messed up, greepy sword technique. His uncle said he never taught him anything like that, but the MC, cool as ever, just told him he was staying true to the essence of the blade. The Count almost laughed, thinking anyone who talked about the essence of the blade clearly never saw a real fight before. Still, he had to admit, even if it was disturbing, the killing intent our boy showed was a real thing in battle. The prince didn't expect that at all. He thought his uncle would start lecturing him about being a true sword master or whatever. But instead, the count gave a little smile and explained he wasn't a knight at all. He was just a soldier, following whatever path led to victory, not the right one. He warned his nephew that his sword style was way too powerful, though. If the bloodlust inside him got any bigger, he'd lose track of who was friend and who was enemy. Adrian came back with a smart reply, saying that's exactly why he made all this chaos in the first place, to fix that flaw. His uncle said fine. He'd be watching closely to see if his nephew got devoured by his own crazy inner demon. After that, it was 3 full days of brutal training duels. Taylor, the dude who challenged our MC at the start, had to fight against the prince's blade, now loaded with pure killing intent every single day. That was rough, bro. Pure suffering. On the last day, Adrian actually gave him a bit of praise for surviving all that madness. He even teased him, pointing out it must suck not winning even once, but Taylor just stammered and denied it. Then, totally out of nowhere, our boy asked a maid to bring him a super fancy box. He handed it to Taylor, saying he'd heard about his unforgivable mistake in the past. He said he didn't know if this would really fix things, but told him to give the box to Baron Tailheim as an apology. He told him it only had a teddy bear and a letter inside, nothing much. Then he just sent him on his way, hoping for a safe trip. Taylor just stood there, speechless, with the box in his hands. Even though our boy didn't actually have to clean up after the old crazy prince who ruined Taylor's life, but he felt like it was only fair to pay people for their troubles. That was his logic. Taylor must have felt it too, because he shouted his thanks as he left. Now, the whole kingdom was buzzing about the prince's duels. Everyone said the prince was so arrogant, he'd dig his own grave and finally get what he deserved. People waited for the scandal to explode, but days went by and nothing happened. No crazy drama. Instead, all the guys the MC defeated started defending him, saying it was all just a misunderstanding and he wasn't actually a jerk. Even worse for the haters, they said they saw his true self during those duels. The nobles totally lost it. They were sure the royal palace must have forced these guys to stay quiet, maybe even threatened them. When our MC heard that rumor, he slammed his fist on the table and started yelling that nobody silenced his opponents. They just stayed quiet because they were too embarrassed to admit he beat them. He started roasting the other nobles, calling them useless and pathetic. Of course, that's when his uncle walked by and joked that Adrian was the last person who should talk about being useless. But here's the real truth. Our hero was actually forcing times everyone he beat to go around and tell everyone he won. He thought that would make people calm down, but all it did was create a new rumor. People said he was threatening his opponents to lie about the fights. After all that chaos, the MC just gave up on trying to control the rumors. He decided to forget about what people thought and focus on training like a maniac. He threw himself into sword drills, working on every single move over and over until he could barely stand. When his training was over for the day, he asked Cars how many more challengers were left. He told him that today's opponent was the last one. Our MC sighed, since no one dared to challenge him anymore. But Cars said he didn't have to worry, because this last challenger was the real deal. A female knight, not just someone who learned her family's arts, but a true fighter who'd trained with a knight squad to get even stronger. Looked like this was going to be a real test. Let's see if our boy was finally ready for a real challenge. So, the last opponent was Erin Kieran, a trainee from the famous Iron Lion Knight Squad. The gate guards checked her armor and saw the Iron Lion badge, so they knew she was the real deal. People called her things like Flower on the Cliff and the Rose with Thorns, and everyone said she broke all the guys' hearts. The guards just stared, blown away by how pretty she was, and whispered to each other that it was crazy for a woman like her to come all alone. They guessed the only reason she'd be here was because the first prince must have some serious pull. A few even joked how awesome it would be to see her beat the prince in front of everyone. For real, her squad was top tier, and she already had a spot as an official knight lined up. But our boy was confused. Why would a knight this good want to fight him? His knight explained that there'd been a little drama in the past, which probably meant the old prince had started something dumb. So, he called over a maid and asked what the hell he'd done before. The maid got all nervous and admitted that he'd insulted Erin. The MC just groaned and held his head, already annoyed at whatever mess the old version of himself had made. Then a memory hit him, a flash from the past. The old prince, looking smug, had walked up to Erin and tried to tell her she should be his personal maid. Talk about cringe. She shut him down right away, reminding him that the Knight Squad didn't belong to him or his family. That pissed off old Prince so much, he called her ugly. Yikes. Talk about being a jerk. After remembering all this, our hero just shook his head. He figured it was just another pathetic pickup attempt from a guy who had no clue. But honestly, he was still confused. There was no way anyone could actually call her ugly. So, he wondered if there was more to the story than he knew. Meanwhile, Aaron gave him a super formal greeting and said he hadn't changed at all. The MC thought to himself, if she really believed that, she was way off. He'd changed so much. It was insane. But when he looked in her eyes, he got the feeling she was never going to forgive him for what the old prince did. Just then, Uncle Bill arrived and spotted Aaron right away. She stepped forward and introduced herself properly as a trainee knight from Iron Lion Squad. The Count didn't even look at our boy. He just warned her to be careful, saying the prince's sword was super poisonous. Bro, talk about bias. Our MC was seriously annoyed that the so-called referee was already rooting against him. But of course, his uncle ignored him completely and told both fighters to get ready. As soon as the duel started, things got real. The MC was feeling good, ready to see what this hotshot knight could do, but Aaron didn't waste a second. She launched a crazy fast attack, blue aura flaring everywhere. Adrian watched her moves like a true expert, totally impressed, but still managed to block her first strike like it was nothing. They went at it. Her sword was fierce, but our hero kept up. Even though their mana energies started clashing and messing with his body, their swords slammed together over and over, so fast the crowd could barely keep up. Then he realized she was getting sucked into his rhythm, even though she was pushing hard, so he figured that tactic was done. Right then, the system in his head blasted a new alert. His Dragon Slayer heart kicked in. Red aura exploded around him, and Aaron looked totally freaked out by the power coming off him. Their swords met again, and the whole place shook with a blast of red energy. She had to jump back, fighting to keep her balance, and she stared at the MC in shock, trying to figure out what kind of monster she was fighting. Our MC, though, was thinking to himself that not all single chain knights were trash, and Aaron was definitely in another league. Suddenly, his eye glowed, and he got a system pop up, saying he could use something called Authority of Judgment, just for a bit. Right away, he could see a full info window about her. Her skills, talents, even her personality. He spat on the ground, realizing this power only worked if his enemy was weaker or just as strong as him. He decided that was enough, playing around, and told everyone the real duel was starting now. Then, charged at Aaron with everything he had. Now, they fought like maniacs, neither one giving up until the sun started to set, and both of them were gasping for air. At that point, Uncle Bill finally jumped in and called it. He ended the duel for the day and told them to rest up for round 2 tomorrow. Our boy cursed, saying he was about to win. But Aaron just shot back that she was about to finish things herself. They just glared at each other, both refusing to back down until Uncle Bill snapped and told them to quit it and go get healed. The royal doctor ran over and used magic to patch up the MC's bruises, while another healer helped Aaron. As he left, she was silent, but our MC watched her go, knowing she was already planning her comeback. Then, the duel kept going across 3 days, with no winner in sight. Watching knights were freaking out. They knew Aaron was awesome, but they never expected the prince to be just as tough. Some of them even started hoping today would finally be the end of this insane match. Right before their next fight, our MC stopped Aaron with a big grin and said he had something to say first. She just gave him a cold look, thinking he was about to apologize at the worst possible time, and told him straight up she wasn't interested in hearing any apology. But he didn't waste any time. He looked right at her and said he understood why she wanted to get her pride back with her own strength. But he told her his reason for fighting was different. Since things were already so intense between them, he suggested they make it more interesting. He said there should be a real prize for the winner. And then, out of nowhere, our boy dropped a wild bet. The loser would have to grant the winner one wish, no matter what. He even said he was ready to kneel and apologize if he lost, which made all the other knights lose their minds. The crowd started murmuring that this was super embarrassing for royalty. They demanded that the prince take back what he said, but our MC just told everyone to back off and mind their own business. Then he looked right at Aaron and asked what she thought. At first, she tried to play it cool. She said she was a loyal knight and couldn't dare to act so bold. But then, she spun around with this confident grin and said that if His Highness agreed, she believed she was good enough to win a prize like that. That got a smirk out of our MC, who told her not to back out of this bet later and warned her to be ready because things were about to get crazy all over again. And man, he wasn't lying. When they started up the duel again, Both of them fought with even more fire. But this time, our hero went full beast mode. He looked like he was straight out of a nightmare. Eren was totally stunned. He was way faster and stronger than the day before. She tried to keep up, but it was no use. Behind him, a giant shadow of a red dragon appeared, and he slammed into her with blows. She couldn't stop, smashing the ground and breaking down her defenses over and over. She tried her best, but the dude just wouldn't let up. Finally, our MC rushed in for the last hit. Eren stood her ground, but when the dust settled, she was down on one knee, totally wrecked. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone was dead, silent. Even the Count was just staring seriously. She couldn't even believe what happened. Meanwhile, Adrian just stood over her and calmly announced he'd won the bet. And then, boom! He hit everyone with the craziest prize request. He said his wish was that he wanted her. Eren's jaw basically hit the floor. Talk about a plot twist. Meanwhile, over on the sidelines, the Knight Cars was thinking back on his job as the prince's escort. He remembered how, when he first met the prince, he expected some out-of-control monster. But honestly, Adrian just greeted him coldly and kept his distance. Cars figured out pretty fast that the rumors were all wrong. The prince wasn't some awful bully. Actually, he watched him train like an absolute madman, even during a lightning storm. Once, all the knights watched as the MC trained through pouring rain, and some of them worried he'd pass out. Cars yelled at him to stop, but he just kept going, not even caring about the danger. Watching that, Cars started to get this weird feeling that maybe the prince was meant for something big. Of course, after the duel, when our boy announced he wanted Eren as his prize, all the knights freaked out again. Cars even started to doubt himself, wondering if maybe he'd gotten the wrong idea about the prince after all. Meanwhile, Eren wasn't having it. With fire in her eyes, she demanded if that was seriously his real wish. Our MC explained that, honestly, he didn't want her as she was now. He called her just a basic trainee who couldn't even beat a loser prince. Then he got real. He said what he truly wanted was the future of the knight, named Eren Kieran. He added that he needed a knight who followed him by their own choice, not someone who stayed just because of royal orders. He said he wanted a knight who belonged to him alone, and he saw real sword talent in her. Then he looked her right in the eyes and invited her to become his knight. Then Eren got quiet, thinking back on her life. Even though she looked amazing and caught everyone's attention, nobody actually saw her as a real knight. Instead, she had to train harder than anyone, and even after beating all the other trainees, people still just called her pretty or said she needed to be protected. She never felt like a real knight until now. Adrian said he wanted her skill, her potential, not just her face. So, she decided to throw down her own condition. She told him that if he wanted her, he'd have to promise to treat her like a knight, not just a woman. He'd have to promise to treat her like a knight, not just a woman. And if he did, she'd follow him. Well, our prince agreed right away, looking deadly serious, and said he accepted her promise. That's all Eren needed. She dropped down on one knee and swore her loyalty to Prince Adrian Leonberg, promising her sword and the rest of her life to his service. Cars and Count Balorhard just watched in silence, probably still trying to process what just happened. As the sun set, their oath was finished. A rising star knight swore herself to the most hated prince around. You better believe this, left all the other nobles fuming and scratching their heads, wondering how the so-called loser prince just stole one of the kingdom's best new knights. And you know those guys are already plotting to ruin this new alliance. Just right then, rumors were flying everywhere now, and people were talking non-stop about our hero and Eren. Some said they had a secret relationship, and others were whispering that the prince really wanted her as his mistress, but was just hiding it by calling her a knight. When our MC heard all this nonsense, he was so pissed off that he started yelling at himself, wondering how he became such a villain in everyone's eyes. Dude was not happy. He felt like the whole world thought he was the worst kind of scum. While he was fuming, Cars showed up and just stood there, silent. He said he wanted to ask about something the prince said before. Our MC was confused and asked what day he was talking about. Cars reminded him about that time he talked about wanting a knight who served him by choice, not just because of some royal order. Then Adrian finally remembered and answered in a cold voice, saying he really meant it. If the king ordered Cars to go somewhere else, he would leave him in a second. No hesitation. Then, with a sly smirk, our MC added that if the time came, maybe he could swear loyalty to him later. Cars looked at him and asked if the MC would actually accept an oath like that. But our MC just shot him down and said no way, because Cars was boring to train with. Dang, that was savage. That guy was totally confused by that answer. Now, our boy thought to himself that he wasn't even joking about it. But suddenly, an official royal message showed up. It said his confinement period was over, and now he was allowed to attend the big royal banquet. He was seriously puzzled. He wondered if he did something wrong, because they let him out a month and a half early after locking him up, like they never wanted to see his face again. As he walked with Cars, he said he just didn't get what the king was thinking at all. Cars asked if he was happy about the early release, but our boy just shrugged and said it didn't matter, because even if he left the palace, he had nowhere to go and nobody to visit. Bro, you could feel the loneliness there. Just then, a maid carrying some papers noticed an invitation addressed to Adrian. She apologized for seeing it, but handed it over anyway. He looked it over and wondered what it was about. Turns out, it was an invite to a social club for young nobles. The maid said it was something he used to go to, back when he was a regular member. He asked if it was a weird place, but the maid got a little awkward and said that women didn't really understand the refined pleasures of noble guys. Yeah, that was her way of saying they did shady stuff there. He groaned and realized it was just a party for drinking and flirting. He almost tossed the invitation, planning to skip it and say he was busy training. But then, he spotted the sender's name. Bernardo of the Eli family. That name made him stop. He remembered his uncle telling him the Eli family used to be big on the mana heart technique, but they crashed and burned about 100 years ago. Suddenly, he changed his mind. He decided he had to go and told the maid to start getting things ready. He stared at the invitation, hoping the Eli family wasn't in total ruins now. The dude was actually curious. So, after 4 months, living as the prince, training like crazy, and losing a ton of weight, our boy called in a tailor for some new clothes. He told the tailor exactly what he wanted: black clothes, simple, but still looking royal. The tailor followed every word and couldn't believe how much weight he had lost. The measurements were about half of what they used to be. He told him to work on banquet clothes later, since he was still planning to change even more. He flashed a confident grin and said his size would definitely drop again. A few days after the mourning period ended, he headed to the club in a super fancy carriage. He let out a tired sigh, thinking that being a prince was actually exhausting. All the details, clothes, guards, carriages, were just annoying and made him feel trapped. While he was grumbling, his eyes landed on the maid sitting in front of him, and he noticed an old scar on her neck. The maid admitted she was at fault for that, and said the prince had every right to scold her about it. Our MC realized this body's reputation was still haunting him. People remembered the old prince's arrogant and childish ways, and those bad stories kept spreading. Suddenly, he realized something crazy. He'd seen this maid for months, but still didn't know her name. Then, he asked her name, and she said, a little nervous, that it was Adelia Byron. That surprised him, because the Byron family barely ever showed up in noble records. He never thought he'd hear that name again in a place like this. Then, memories flooded back. He thought about the old days, before kingdoms or cities, when humans were just weak victims, hunted by stronger races. But then, heroes showed up and changed everything. After a long, brutal war, humans became the rulers of the land, and people called those saviors the 5 heroes. One of those heroes was a legendary warrior named Gruhorn. That hero, standing proud, sword in hand, wondered what her own future would look like. Now that the war was finally over, then there was this badass warrior lady, brave as hell, fighting against a whole army of giants. She was thinking about her future after the war, like what would come next for her and her companion. But she didn't let that slow her down. She charged forward, straight at the biggest, scariest giant, Ida, the Giant King. She didn't even blink. She just went and chopped the dude's head clean off. Just like that, the giant's reign of terror ended. People called her the Iron-Blooded Sword and the Marchioness, but her real name was Agnes Byron. So, Agnes stood over the dead king, looking at the rest of the giant army, like they were trash. She yelled at them, calling them thieves and monsters who only cared about stealing and causing pain. Man, she was furious, and you could feel how much she hated those guys. But then, boom, the memory faded, and we were back with our MC, the poor guy trapped in the prince's body. He was disgusted by all that pure rage. Like, just hearing it made him feel dirty inside. He glanced at his maid, Adelia, and honestly had no clue how someone related to a legend like Agnes Byron could end up working as a royal maid. Talk about a fall from greatness. Right then, his moody thoughts got cut off because his knight announced they'd arrived. Adrian kind of dragged himself back to reality, said the timing was just perfect, and got out of the carriage. Before leaving, He told Adelia he wanted to chat later, which freaked her out. She looked super anxious, not knowing what the hell he wanted. When our boy walked inside, some young dude with white hair came running over, grinning like crazy, and calling him Your Highness. He introduced himself as Bernardo from the Eli family, being all respectful and acting like he was super happy to see the prince alive and well. But our MC looked at this guy and thought he seemed like nothing but a spoiled party animal. Honestly, not impressed. Meanwhile, Bernardo was staring at Adrian, thinking he looked skinny and maybe even sick, but our boy just gave him a sly grin that made Bernardo pause. And when he nervously asked if the prince was still sick, our boy said, "Nope, he was fine and actually happy to be here." Then, with a weirdly confident smile, he put his hand on his shoulder and said it was all thanks to him, that today was going to be fun. Yeah, Bernardo looked pretty damn confused by that. Inside the club, things were wild. Young nobles were partying hard, loud, drinking, flirting with women, the whole deal. Bernardo kept an eye on our MC, thinking it was odd. See, the prince was famous for getting drunk and causing trouble with the ladies, but now our boy just sat there, calm as ever, holding a fancy drink and watching everyone with a cool vibe. It was a total personality flip, and everybody noticed. Then it got weird. Some noble walked up and started running his mouth about the MC and Aaron, talking about the rumor that the prince had plucked the flower of the Iron Lion. The guy whined that he missed his chance, said he wanted her for himself, and then started going off about how hot she was, even in armor, and how he imagined her naked. Man, seriously gross. But our hero wasn't having any of that. He hit the guy with a sharp, "You there?" and then asked if the dude had a little brother or sister at home. The noble got all confused but said, yes, he did. He just stared him down and said, "Well, that's good." Suddenly, bam, our MC punched him right in the face, hard enough to send him crashing to the floor with blood pouring out. The whole room exploded with screaming, especially from the ladies. Everybody was stunned, including Bernardo. Our hero leaned over the bloody noble and, in this icy calm voice, said it was lucky for his family that their line wouldn't die out. Then, just to make sure the lesson stuck, he kicked him while he was down. The club was in total chaos now, everyone freaking out. Standing over him, he gave this chilling look and announced that from now on, the younger brother would be the family heir. And he still wasn't done. He hit the noble with one more brutal punch, just for continuing to insult his nidus. The place was a total mess by now, people panicking left and right. He grabbed the guy by the collar, and when the noble shouted, asking why, he told him, "Listen up," he said, in a voice colder than ice, that he could handle everyone calling him a scoundrel, but he'd never let anyone treat him like one. The nobles around had no idea what that even meant, but you could tell they were terrified. Apparently the fool still didn't get it, so Ardian decided the guy needed another lesson and punched him one more time, dropping him to the floor with a howl of pain. Finally, with the noble out cold and the club in shambles, he called out for Bernardo Eli. Bernardo rushed over, dropping to his knees, scared out of his mind, and waiting for orders. Our boy, face still smeared with blood, flashed a twisted smile and reminded him, "See, didn't I say today would be fun?" Bernardo was shaking, not knowing if this was all some kind of sick joke, but our boy just ordered him to go get the court knights. The poor guy didn't even hesitate. He bolted off to do what he was told, leaving our MC standing there, totally calm, in the middle of a room full of panicking nobles and chaos everywhere. Just right then, our boy wiped the blood off his face, like it was nothing, then told all the women in the hall to get out. Some of the nobles started to look confused, maybe even hopeful, but one guy tried to sneak out with the women. He shot him a killer glare and told him only the ladies were leaving. He even grinned and said that the guy could go too if he wanted, but warned him that if he left now, he might walk out as a woman. Bro, that noble freaked out and screamed, clearly remembering how the last loudmouth ended up. Honestly, that was kind of hilarious. Now it was just our prince and the nervous, sweating nobles. He turned to them, laying into them, for not showing the tiniest bit of respect. He said none of them had even bothered to kneel for a royal, and they thought it was fine to mock him to his face and talk trash about his knight. The room was silent. Everyone looked like they wanted to disappear through the floor. Just then, the court knights marched in. Adrian stepped up and asked what kind of charges could be pressed in this situation. One of the knights explained that mocking a royal was a direct insult to the whole royal family, and you could see the nobles turn even paler. The knight kept going, saying, "If you undermine the crown's authority, that's basically high treason." Another knight asked him who he wanted to arrest. Our MC just gave a slow, scary smile and said, with perfect calm, that he wanted all of them taken down. You should have seen the nobles' faces, bro. Total panic. Later, he got dragged into the throne room. The king was just cold, saying that the prince had already caused chaos right after his punishment was over. The king was pissed, letting him know that 14 young nobles were locked up and that our boy had thrown every possible charge at them, from royal insults to high treason. The king asked if he even understood how big a deal this was, saying, the law demanded serious punishment for calling the knights, but the king also warned that the reaction from all those families could not be ignored. But our hero just gave that famous mocking smile and said maybe the king was worried for nothing. He explained that those 14 guys were losers and outcasts, even in their own families. He said keeping them around would only bring shame, so their families might not even care. Then he dropped a smart idea. The king should send some letters. When the king asked whom to send them to, then he said the answer was obvious. The siblings of the troublemakers. Those brothers and sisters could handle family business way better than the court. The king seemed to get the point and just told everyone to leave. As our MC walked out, he thought to himself that he might have finally shut his dad up for once. Not bad, huh? He was feeling pretty damn proud. Later, Adrian tried to reassure Adelia, who was totally freaking out. He smiled wide and told her she didn't need to worry. He wasn't going to hurt anybody. But she broke down and started crying, asking what she had ever done to deserve all this. Our MC, deep down, figured the old prince must have treated her like garbage. He looked at her and thought about her family. The Byrons weren't even a footnote in the noble records anymore. Their mighty history? Totally erased. Their badass martial arts? Gone. They had no pride left, just a scared descendant working as a maid. Then, out of nowhere, a magic window popped up in his head, showing all of Adelia's stats. Turns out, she was crazy talented at sword fighting and super sensitive to mana. But her traits? Dude, they were nuts. She had Butcher. She loses it at the sight of blood. War lover, obsessed with fighting. Weak-minded, soft-hearted, nurturing, loves taking care of people, and submissive nature, gets real happy serving someone loyal. Our boy was honestly stunned, wondering what it all meant. She could go nuts in a battle, but was also a gentle soul. That's some wild mix, bro. Now, he felt his head spinning. She's got insane talent, but nothing to stop her going crazy. He wondered if he should really let someone like that loose in the world. Still, she was too good to ignore. Then he noticed something useful, the submissive nature part. If she had a real master, she'd be happiest and give her full loyalty. He figured this was the perfect time to use it. Then he turned to her and told her to swear loyalty to him. Poor Adelia looked like she just got hit by lightning and said she didn't get what he meant. Our MC explained he wanted her to be his knight, and he wanted her to swear that right now. She just sank to her knees, begging that it was too much to ask. He reminded her she was the one who called her family worthless before, so he offered to take care of her whole family if she'd swear loyalty and serve him as her master. He figured if she lost control, he'd be the one to keep her in check. Meanwhile, Adelia, still shaking, asked if he really meant what he said about helping her family. Our MC didn't hesitate. He said yes. Then he added that he'd even bring her family to the capital so she could see them whenever she wanted. That did it. Her face just lit up with hope, and she agreed, all fired up. So, just like that, he picked up a crazy, strong, loyal knight with a wild side. Now, Adelia knelt right there and swore her loyalty to our hero, calling herself the eldest daughter of the Byron family. She said she would serve him and dedicate her life to him as her master. Our boy placed his hand on her head, showing that he accepted her oath. Then he told her, straight up, that from now on, she had to obey his orders with no questions asked. She agreed. And, honestly, you could see happiness all over her face. But, while she looked super happy, the prince was just sitting there, wondering inside if this was a good idea or if he had made a huge mistake. Of course, nothing stays quiet in this castle for long. Wild rumors started flying everywhere. People said the first prince was back to his old trashy self, using gross tricks to force knights to join him. Some even said he was calling in only the sons of the rich and powerful, just to beat them up and throw them into dungeons. The latest gossip? That he made a maid, who had never even touched a sword, his direct knight. Everyone started saying he was just building a private harem, and calling it his knight squad. All this nonsense eventually reached the prince, and man, he was pissed. He asked Kars, his knight, when the whole world suddenly got so obsessed with his life. He said, for real, he had only picked one direct knight, and still, people hadn't shut up about it since the sun came up. Our MC imagined his dad, the king, probably getting a headache trying to clean up his son's mess, while rumors spread that the prince was busy playing around with women. His uncle, the count, was probably calling him a hopeless idiot, wondering if he'd totally forgotten about their bet. And his own little brother? That guy was probably making jokes, saying, only someone like our MC would make a maid his knight. Then, our prince just felt exhausted, totally lost about how these rumors could spread this fast. But before he could even catch his breath, one of the maids came in and said the queen was coming. That was it. He just blew up, saying he was sick of these surprise visits. Then, the queen walked in, not looking happy, and told him she really thought he was starting fresh. But now, it looked like he was going right back to his old, shameful habits. She muttered under her breath that maybe this was for the best. Our MC, totally lost, asked what she meant. The queen perked up and said she figured out the cure for his behavior: marriage. She was now determined to pick the right wife for him, and told him to just trust her. Bro, he just stared at her, not knowing what to say, feeling like he had no clue what was happening in his own life. Later, Adelia sat in front of him. She asked if this oath thing meant she would have mana now. He told her, yeah, she would, but her mana would be extra special. Our boy gathered blue mana in his hands and started explaining that the world might have forgotten the Sword Queen, but he hadn't. He still remembered her. The way she moved her sword, and even the sound of her brave heart. Then, he pushed that mana into her, and boom, system messages popped up. They said she had discovered mana, the transfer worked, and her body was now stable. Then, with a flash in her eyes, another message said she created her own mana heart. Anyway, now, Adelia sat there, staring at this golden aura around her, totally amazed, asking if this was really mana. Our MC told her that what she just felt was how you refine the mana heart, and he ordered her to practice it every time she could. But suddenly, he leaned forward. He was exhausted. The girl rushed over, worried, and asked if he was okay. The poor guy was shocked at how tired he'd gotten just from making one mana heart. Still, he told her he was just a little tired, no big deal. She asked why he'd go this far for someone as lowly as her. He didn't want to get into it and ordered her to forget about it and leave. But she just stood there, giving him a strange look. When he asked what was up, she bowed and promised again to serve him, with all her loyalty forever. The MC smiled and reminded her, hey, I'm your master now. Adelia said she'd never forget that, all fired up, but Adrian thought to himself that maybe he was the one who might actually forget. She was dead serious though, and promised to remember. A few days later, his night cars brought news. He said the royal guards were holding Bernardo Eli as a witness for the latest mess, and nobody could see him before the trial. Our MC asked if he was supposed to go to that trial too. Cars reassured him, no way, royals never have to stand in court. Adrian was relieved, but then joked that they were going a bit overboard, holding a whole trial for this. Adelia was nearby, polishing a silver cup while all this went down. He turned to her and asked how she was feeling lately. She got confused, but he explained he meant her mana heart. She said it was all good now. So, he told her that from today, she would join him for training. He ordered her to change into proper clothes and meet him at the training yard. He also pointed out she should put away the rag she was holding. She was a knight now, not a maid. Our girl looked shocked, but you could tell she was proud. And Adrian, well, he just kept going, ready to turn this wild bunch into true legends or burn the whole castle down, trying. Anyway, now, out in the training yard, our MC was busy doing his warm-ups, probably stretching like a legend, when suddenly, his uncle's voice cut in, asking what the hell he was doing. But nope, the old man wasn't talking to our boy. He meant Adelia, who was huffing and running laps in her shiny new armor. Adrian looked at him, kind of smirking, and asked if the count really hadn't heard the rumors. He said, yeah, he was turning that girl into a real knight. Well, that just lit his uncle's fuse. The guy got all fired up, yelling about how knights must look like a total joke to the prince if he was pulling stunts like this. The count started scolding him hard, saying it was insane to be so reckless right now. That was it. Our hero snapped and yelled back, demanding to know why his uncle kept butting into his life. He even told the old man that if he hated this so much, why the hell was he even here? Right in the middle of their argument, Adelia came running back, totally out of breath from her 10 laps. She dropped to her knees, apologizing for being the reason they were fighting. But he just told her not to worry about it. There was nothing to regret. Then he handed her a wooden sword and, with this big, confident grin, told her today was her first lesson in basic sword moves. To show her how it was done, he stepped up and did a smooth, powerful sword swing, blue aura swirling around him. He explained she needed to get the stance right first, and then swing it, just like he did. He told her to give it a shot. Meanwhile, Adelia, still gasping for air, took the wooden sword and nervously asked if she should do it like this. That's when her eyes flashed bright green. And, dude, she just nailed it. She basically copied the move perfectly. A blue aura exploded around her, and she hit so hard the ground cracked under her feet. Uncle Bill just stood there, open-mouthed, like he'd seen a ghost. Then, our MC was frozen too. He couldn't believe she got it on her first try, just by watching. Adelia looked up at him, all innocent, and asked if her stance was okay. He told her to wait a second while he tried to figure out what the hell just happened. At that moment, panic punched him in the gut. He remembered her submissive nature skill, meaning she'd follow the strong, not the weak. After everything his old self did to her, what if she ended up way stronger than him? Would she still listen to him, or would she just walk away? Before he could spiral any further, his uncle jumped in, way less angry now, and actually impressed, saying Adelia's talent was crazy. Our MC immediately grabbed his uncle's arm and practically hissed at him, asking what he was planning. He warned him to back off, making it clear that she was his. Of course, the Count just laughed, saying, "What could a newbie like the prince possibly offer someone this talented?" He called him a beginner who barely even touched a sword, and said there's no way he could handle her power. Now, our boy just thought to himself that his old buddy would have made this smug uncle run away, shaking in his boots. But, he admitted, he wasn't that man yet. Still, he decided no one else would ever take Adelia, not a single soul. After all, he was the king of giants, the dragon of light, the one who drank the blood of monsters. He was Gruhorn, damn it. At that moment, a system message popped up, saying part of his soul had awakened through his own will. A crazy red aura wrapped around him as he glared at his uncle and told him, hands down, she was his and nobody could touch her. He even ordered his uncle not to look at her or even think about taking her, because he hated when people tried to steal what was his. But all of a sudden, things started feeling weird for our boy. His mind went cold and dark, like he was drowning deep in some nightmare ocean. He wondered if his body was about to break from this power. He saw himself standing at the edge of a black hole, facing a furious fire monster trapped inside. He realized the evil sword inside him might eat his whole soul if he lost control. That would be the end. But somehow, he managed to claw his way back and reached for a tiny bit of himself in all that chaos, trying to tame the wild power he had inside. When he finally snapped back to reality, his uncle was talking again. The Count said a normal knight could save the lives of 10 soldiers, and a great knight could save 100. But then, with this wild excitement, he yelled that a girl like Adelia, with her talent, could save 1,000 soldiers, or maybe even more. He just looked at his uncle, thinking, man, was this just his uncle's personal dream, or did the guy have some huge plan cooking? Because this wasn't just any man. This was the boss of the northern border, the guy who guarded the whole north, and you could tell he wasn't playing games. But Adrian didn't even let his uncle finish his big speech. He just shut down the whole idea. Cold, no thanks, not happening. Which made the Count practically explode. The old man started shouting about how Adelia could save a ton of lives, like he wasn't listening at all. But Adelia, totally serious and steady, stepped up right then and said her body and soul already belonged to the prince, and she couldn't follow anyone else's orders. The Count just stood there, totally lost for words, looking like someone had unplugged his brain. Right then, a system message flashed up in front of our MC. It explained that her super submissive personality made her automatically loyal to the top dog in the room, which, yeah, was definitely him. The prince couldn't help but give a sneaky little victory smile, knowing all his work wasn't for nothing. Turning to his uncle, he got extra cold and reminded him that his only goal here was to lose weight. He asked, all smug, if the Count had anything left to teach him now, or if he should just hit the road. He made it super clear. If his uncle wanted to keep showing up at the palace, he better stay out of our boy business. The Count didn't have any good comeback, so he just nodded, looking like he'd swallowed a lemon. But did the old man actually stay away? Hell no. The Count kept coming back to the palace, hiding in the background to watch Adelia train. Adrian honestly loved it. Every time his uncle saw she's getting stronger, his pride got stomped on a little more, and there was nothing he could do about it. Then, one day, while she was training, her wooden sword suddenly lit up with golden light. She freaked out, and honestly, so did both the prince and his uncle. The Count, though, seemed to know exactly what he was seeing. Our MC was left wondering if she'd already picked up sword resonance, and he started clapping for her, cheering her on. But deep down, he was seriously worried she might outpace him any day now. Adelia looked super happy, But then, the Count marched over and asked our MC if he was the one who taught her the mana heart trick too. He just shot back that, yeah, he was, and what was the big deal? The Count lost it, yelling about how it was bad enough the prince learned such weak skills, and now he was teaching them to others too? He had enough, and told him to get out. The Count argued back, saying she had endless potential, and the prince was ruining her for good. Finally, he called over his knight, Cars, to throw the Count out. But the old man just grumbled and said he'd leave on his own. After that mess, Adelia got a little nervous and asked the prince if the stuff he was teaching her was really just some dumb trick. But our hero firmly told her no way. It was way more than that. She wanted to know why the Count said those things. So, he explained calmly that his uncle just didn't know the real truth. He said everyone these days had forgotten how strong the old mana heart really was. Otherwise, they would never have tossed it aside like trash. He told her she'd see soon enough just how powerful the mana heart could be. Time passed and training got intense. Adrian started getting better too, blue aura swirling around him while he practiced. Then, surprise, his uncle showed up again. He couldn't help but tease him, saying he thought the old man had finally quit for good. But the Count just challenged him to fight. He said he'd only use one mana ring, and if he could make him take even half a step back, he'd admit defeat. He even promised to grant any wish the prince wanted, even teaching him family secrets. He grinned and said he'd take that deal for now, but he clearly wanted more. Then it was on. Adrian rushed his uncle, going all out, trying to slice his neck. The old man dodged easily, saying that his blade was still as wild as always. But he didn't stop, slamming attack after attack at the Count, his face full of stubborn fire. The Count dodged everything and kept this annoying, smug look on his face, surrounded by a scary aura. He started mocking our boy, asking if that was all he had. Then, with one hard blow, the uncle sent our boy flying back, and basically asked if he was done already. But our MC wasn't the type to give up. He stood back up, thinking to himself that, for all his uncle's attitude, there was one thing he couldn't deny. The Count was strong as hell. He realized his uncle was just waiting for him to waste his mana, so he could crush him and teach him a lesson. With the mana heart at this level, there was no way to win. His uncle planned this whole thing. But instead of getting mad, the MC just smiled slyly. He started talking about stuff from 400 years ago, which made his uncle raise his eyebrows. Back then, knights with mana hearts pulled off insane feats. They could beat legendary monsters, no problem. Our MC complained about how, as soon as a new skill popped up, everyone dumped the old techniques like garbage. These days, everybody believed mana chains were way better than the mana heart. His uncle asked what the point of the speech was. He made it clear. He completely disagreed. He said the problem wasn't the mana heart, but the person using it, and pointed out not all mana hearts were created equal. Then he hit his uncle with a big question. Had he ever heard of something called the heroic martial epic? Then his uncle just scoffed when our hero tossed out his question about the heroic martial epic. The old man acted like the battlefield wasn't the place for annoying songs, so the prince just grinned. He totally expected this attitude. Honestly, the Count was always calling the mana heart a cheap trick for mercenaries, so it wasn't surprising he didn't get it. The uncle cut him off, sounding extra annoyed, and told our MC to quit babbling. He even threw in a comment, asking if the prince needed more time to catch his breath. But our boy wasn't about to back down. He told him flat out that he didn't, and suddenly his eyes started to glow bright blue. Then things got wild. The prince began chanting out a serious spell, talking about how every knight's path becomes an accomplishment, and that 100 victories were his pride and his strength. The Count just froze, looking totally shocked. Suddenly, he got a system message. It said, the memory of those 100 victories over 20 trainees had been engraved into his heart. Another message popped up, telling him this accomplishment had become a real, heroic, martial epic. That power flowed straight into the prince's weapon. And another system message named it Epic of Duels, a normal rank, heroic martial epic, created right then. The prince's eyes flashed with power, and the system announced the Epic of Duels effect was active. The result of all his dueling and training these last 6 months, with a thick blue aura swirling around him, he declared for everyone to hear that this was the true strength of the mana heart, the heroic martial epic. But the Count still wasn't impressed. He said it didn't matter. As long as the prince only had a mana heart, he'd never beat the power of a mana chain. And as soon as their swords clashed, the energy from the uncle's mana chains forced the prince's energy backwards, sending a wave of pain through our poor guy. The uncle noticed the prince could take pain like a madman, but our hero just powered through it anyway. Thing is, to get this epic, our MC had already fought over 100 matches and eaten that chain backlash 1,000 times. He made this epic of duels specifically to smash through chain knights like his uncle. Every duel, every ache, every reversal was burned into his soul, and now he set all that pain free. Aura burning, he shouted, that this was the power of a soul stained by pain. Even the Count had to admit he was finally starting to look like something special. He raised his sword, glowing blue and ready to go. Anyway, now the fight turned nuts. When their swords crashed together, the Count blocked easily and threw out a cocky, "Is that all you got?" But our MC wasn't done. He kept up the pressure, pushing the Count further and further back. For the first time, he looked downright dominant. He was actually forcing the old man to retreat, but even with that, he saw the Count still wasn't going down easy. He had to catch his breath and steady himself. And that's when he fired back at his uncle, reminding him that not all mana hearts were the same. The Count just rolled his eyes and called our MC arrogant, then came at him hard, forcing the prince to go full defense. Their weapons smashed together, sending up a gigantic burst of energy. When the dust settled, the Count stood in the smoke and announced that the games were over. He actually praised the prince, saying his determination was really impressive up to now. But then, he added that he would praise him while he was kneeling on the ground. And our MC realized in his heart, a normal rank epic just wasn't enough. Then the prince got all deep, talking about the old days. He said the knights from 400 years ago made a massive mistake. They wiped out every monster and threat, leaving nothing real for their kids to fight. They left behind all their skills and epics, but over time, legends faded and nobody believed in dragons or giant kings anymore. Sure, people created new heroic martial epics, but now they were based on beating 10 knights or 100 soldiers. Just people fighting people. No legends, no true heroes. Nobody could solve the new mysteries. The prince answered that, with mana chains, you could never reach true greatness or break through to something epic. Then, his uncle just laughed and wondered if the prince was drunk in the middle of the day. He said, none of this made any sense. Our hero just looked at him, thinking how arrogant and clueless his uncle was. Then, with his eyes blazing, he said he'd show everyone just how much power they'd thrown away. If nobody remembered, he'd be the one to teach them how to shatter dragon scales and drink dragon blood, just like in the old days. While he started reciting the dragon-slaying epic, another system message popped up, warning him that his body couldn't handle this level of power, and he started bleeding under the pressure. The system cut off most of the epic, letting him recite only a tiny piece. One verse, a little sliver of the real thing. Our MC gritted his teeth and announced with total determination, "Split the dragon scales." Now, both swords smashed together, sending red and blue energy flying everywhere. The Count was floored, feeling his own power getting devoured, realizing he might actually lose control. The explosion rocked the whole training ground, blowing apart half the arena. When the dust cleared, the prince crashed to the ground so hard, his guards started screaming in terror. His uncle stood in the middle of the mess, and the prince dragged himself up, facing him. He reminded the Count about the bet to only use one mana ring, but the Count had gone all out, using all four, and still, his wooden sword was snapped in two. Our MC stood there, victorious, pointing out the supposed truth that hard energy could never beat. Chain energy was a lie. Then, right in front of everyone, he declared that Count Vale Balorhard had lost. But while the prince stood there, a dark power was raging inside him, and some voice deep down begged him to stop rejecting this path. But it was way too late for that. In the end, our boy collapsed on the ground,